วัสดีค่ะต้อนรับนะคะกลับเข้าสู่ที่บริเวณ Tech Stage อีกครั้งหนึ่งนะคะเรียนเชิญสำหรับท่านที่สนใจค่ะเซสชั่นถัดไปกำลังจะเริ่มต้นขึ้นแล้วนะคะตอนนี้เราก็อยู่ภายในงาน CyberSec Asia and Thailand International Cyber Week 2025นะคะสำหรับเรื่องของนะคะอุตสาหกรรมนะคะของการบินต่างๆนะคะก็แน่นอนว่าจะมีเรื่องของการป้องกันแล้วก็ภัยความเสี่ยงภัยคุกคามมากมายเดี๋ยวยังไงแล้วเราจะได้มาฟังกันนะคะสำหรับเซสชั่นถัดไปนะคะจาก CISO and Airline Captain ค่ะใครที่สนใจตอนนี้เรียนเชิญที่บริเวณนะคะเวทีของ Tech Stage ได้เลยค่ะ Welcome back once again distinguished guests ladies and gentlemen we are at Tech Stage right here at CyberSec Asia and Thailand International Cyber Week 2025, which we have many of interesting activities from the distinguished speakers are going to share their knowledge, also the trend updates, and many opportunities for all the audience as well to share your thought and ideas. So now here, I would like to continue to the next interesting topic that our speaker are going to talk about securing the skies, a risk-based cyber assessment of commercial airplanes. Now here, we have an honor to welcome the speaker from CISO and Airline Captain. Could you please give a big round of applause and welcome Captain Serge on stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board. Imagine we're flying sunrise, 40,000 feet at about 12 kilometers. It's been a long flight. Everybody's tired. Girls in the back are sleeping. Passengers had their food. The heating is up. Everybody's sleeping. Seatbelts are fastened. Everything is fine. Everything as it's supposed to be. All systems are in the green. We have fuel, as you can see. Nothing happening. We're just cruising along at 12 kilometers of altitude. Suddenly, terrain avoidance warning systems are starting to yell. My airplane warning systems are calling out, yelling, pull up, terrain, pull up, terrain. Looking at my first officer, looking at my screens, looking outside. There's no terrain here at 12 kilometers of altitude. What's going on? Well, it appeared my GPS were being spoofed. Today, we're going to talk about what this exactly means, the difference between GPS jamming and GPS spoofing. We'll talk about the safety of flying commercial airplanes in peacetime, in wartime, in near wartime. We're going to talk about hybrid warfare and all things related. Unfortunately, only 23 minutes left, so it's going to be a little bit short, but I'm going to do my best. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board. Fasten your seat belts. Put your seats in the upright position. Stow your stow tables. Sit back and relax. We'll get to the runway and get into the air. So, flying, is it safe? We all fly a lot. It's just what we do. We can't do without it anymore. It's also very cheap. So, a lot of flying, a lot of accidents happening? Nah, not really. Look at this number here. I'm talking about commercial jets, not turboprops, commercial jets with jet engines. Accidents, you see, this is the actual number of accidents, fatal accidents in the world that we can measure. So you see this one going down. Here we had 2 accidents in 2022, 2 fatal accidents in 2022. But now you look at the gray background. This is the amount of flights we're doing every year. Millions, and it gets more and more and more. So, more flights, less accidents. Now, let's combine these 2 tables into the next one, and then we get this. Accident rate per million of flights. Going all the way down, this was because we were stopped flying with propeller airplanes. We started flying with more reliable jet engines. Very reliable, getting less. Right now, In 2023, we had 0.07 fatal accidents per million of flights. If you start calculating, that means you will have a deadly accident in 100 something years if you fly every day. So is flying safe? Very safe. 37 million flights, 0 fatal accidents in 2023. So this is an update. We are now at 0.03 in last year. So we halved already the accident rate globally. Of course, there is no such thing as zero risk. As cybersecurity practitioners, we understand that very well. There is no such thing as zero risk. Even if you stay in your bed all day, you can die of a heart attack. Doesn't exist. And John Shedd said it already, a ship in port is safe, but it's not meant to be in port. And the same goes for airplanes. Airplanes are built to fly, so we fly them. And that's because the risk is still not zero. Accidents still happen, but we're working on it. The aviation global community is working every day to improve training, technology, design, processes, and everything we do every day to get that number even lower. And we're working on it every day. So let's have a look at accident risk in aviation. And let's use a very common small framework for this. Risk equals threat times vulnerability times consequence. Using this small framework, we're going to have a look. No, the other one. Because I want to tell you about this one. This is actually a funny story. This is in Alaska, a small Cessna. And in Alaska, they have skis because they land on glaciers. There's a lot of snow, especially in winter. Everything is white. So this guy was making a landing on a glacier, and he was landing there many times before. And everything went fine on approach, and he landed, and then he was not rolling out, I guess we call it gliding out, and then suddenly there was a patch of soft snow. The right ski dug in, and then it collapsed, and then it toppled over. Actually, there's two people, they got out of it, no problem, nothing at all. They activated their emergency locator beacon. Half an hour later, the helicopter was there, picked them up. So this was an accident, but without any life taken. That's also exists, because normally in all the Hollywood movies, we see airplanes crashing, and a lot of people die. But there's a lot of incidents, actually, where nobody gets hurt at all. We even mitigate the incidents. So there's a difference between incidents and accidents. Okay, let's start with the consequences of risk in aviation. And I think we are all very aware that there are people on board and that these people might be hurt. Back to a cybersecurity environment in any corporation, you get hacked, you lose access to your server, or whatever, your screen goes black, or you got a DDoS attack. Oh, okay, can't work, go home, right? No life taken. This is different. This is why risk in aviation is taken way more seriously than cyber risk in general. I think we all know this picture. This was MH17 shot down in 2014 by the Russians because it was flying close to, or it was flying over the eastern part of Ukraine. So, accident risk, the consequence is high. I think we can all agree on that one. We have a very high consequence factor. Speaking of conflict zones, the statistics we saw earlier were peacetime. Since not too long ago, we have war again. And it's not getting less. Dictators are ramping up their game, wanting more control or whatever they want in their egos. But in aviation, we consider these regions here conflict zones, meaning there is a higher risk for aviation. It's quite a lot if you look at it. Of course, the red ones, there's active war going on. We're not flying there at all. The yellow ones, we need to take precaution. Does it mean it's safe overflying? It's a higher elevated risk. Because when we look at the vulnerability of my airplane, it's a civil airplane. I have no weapons on board to protect myself. I have no electronic warfare on board, no radars on board to see missiles coming. I'm just a sitting duck flying from A to B like a cargo ship. I have no protection. So flying in the area of conflict zones is a risk on its own. MH17 didn't see it coming. The Kazakh guys on the first Christmas day that were shot by Russians again over Russia itself, they didn't see it coming. They're flying along, bang, rocket, missile, whatever. So vulnerability-wise, aviation in peacetime is actually not that vulnerable anymore. We mitigated all that. And the statistics I just showed prove that. But in wartime, crisis time, or conflict zones, that is different. We are very vulnerable again. Which begs the case that we need to split this risk in two parts. A peacetime and a wartime / in between wartime, what we have right now. So far, so good? So, flying near conflict zones has had a few casualties. This is a list I could find of airplanes that were shot down by military missiles flying in the vicinity of conflict zones. And I just talked about this one here, the last one. Azerbaijan is considered a friend of Putin, so they overflew Russia. But the military, their identification, friend or foe, is not that mature. They thought it was an enemy airplane. They launched a rocket and it's gone. This risk of misidentification in conflict zones is my biggest problem when I fly there. So this is a new risk that we have with all these wars going on in the world right now. I also need to make a distinguish between kinetic warfare and hybrid warfare. So kinetic warfare is everything that shoots. Rockets, missiles, physical warfare. And when you talk about my airplane, we talk about air-to-air missiles or ground-to-air missiles. This is Iranian, but it's a plain copy of the Hawk missile systems that we have in NATO. So this is kinetic warfare. It's traditional, direct. There's iron flying around trying to hit you. And there's a clear distinction between war and peace. We don't shoot each other when it's peace. We try to hit each other when there's war. Very simple, right? Highly visible, and it'll be a newspaper headline. No questions about it. However, hybrid warfare is what's happening right now, more and more every day. This is actually way cheaper because you can do it from a distance. We're talking about cyberspace, electronic warfare, with the goal to weaken and confuse your enemy. And von Clausewitz already wrote it in his famous book on war. It's about creating friction, distracting your enemy. Right now, the Russians are performing a hybrid war on Europe, and they're just hacking everything they can find. They blow up malls, they cut subsea cables, all that stuff. It's not kinetic warfare. They're not shooting missiles into Europe, but they're certainly not our friends because they're destroying our critical infrastructure. And they are creating friction in our societies. Not even talking about the disinformation campaigns. So hybrid warfare, very different. It's in between peace and war. So when we talk about the threat factor in our risk formula, in peacetime, threat to me is weather. Thunderstorms, lightning, slippery runway. Those are all threats that impose a risk. But in wartime or hybrid warfare time, we have these guys trying to confuse my airplane systems on purpose. We have GPS jamming trying to confuse my navigation system. We have radio barrage spoofing. There's a lot of stuff going on that they can do to create confusion. Again, not kinetic warfare. They're not shooting a missile at me, but they are jeopardizing my flight. Quickly, the difference between GPS jamming and spoofing, because there's a big difference. So jamming means I send out a signal, a very simple, cheap, high-power signal to my GPS signals, and they just get confused. They're cutting it off. Spoofing, on the other side, is much more complicated. Spoofing means that you're feeding my GPS receivers with false signals. Much more complicated. Not every nation state can do that. Jamming, actually any military unit has a jamming unit nowadays, so anybody can do that. If I'm flying and I'm getting into an area of GPS spoofing, it always starts with jamming, so it confuses my navigation suite. I get warnings, navigation inaccurate, and then suddenly signal gone, and then signal back, but then I'm not here, I'm 500 kilometers there. Because they fed my GPS with wrong signals. So what happens then if my airplane doesn't know where it is? Actually, air traffic control also don't know where I am. So a lot of traffic from Asia to Europe goes over Iraq, just across the border with Iran. The Iranians love airliners getting lost and veering off into their airspace. Because then they can push a button, shoot a rocket, create a problem. And it's their airspace, so they're allowed to do that. We're very, very careful with that. Also, I cannot navigate to my next beacon. In the air, we have routes like highways. So I need to be from this position to this position in a straight line. That's what they're expecting, because there's a lot of other airplanes flying there as well, and we try not to hit each other on average. So difference between jamming and spoofing, very important. Then, to make it even more interesting, new technologies, which are very cheap, like this drone gun, are hitting the market. This thing costs you 30K US, and it disturbs navigation signals, communication systems, channels, and control channels of drones. So these things are being used in Ukraine a lot. They're very cheap, and you can really confuse a big swarm of drones coming at you. But it can also confuse my airplane. If you have this thing with this guy, well, not this guy, but this thing in the beginning of the runway, and you point it at an airplane, all the navigation systems and all the landing systems will go berserk. Airplane will make a go around, the next one will do the same, we're running out of fuel, it creates chaos if you do this for 1 hour. Very cheap, hybrid warfare, not shooting rockets, but creating a higher risk in hybrid warfare time. So, here we go. GPS interference, just to give you an idea. This is Kiev. Moscow in the corner there. Netherlands, Denmark, behind the green here. So we're talking Central Europe. This is the current map, yesterday's GPS interference map. So all these red areas, and even the yellow areas, when you fly there, you will have difficulties navigating. But when we talk risk in aviation, like I said before, we have no risk appetite. Our risk appetite is zero. We cannot accept risk appetite. In your company you can, but we cannot, because we have lives on board. We talk cyber safety, and we don't talk cyber security. It's not good enough. We talk safety, because we talk lives. Risk appetite, all the way over there. We don't like it. Why do we don't like it? Because you don't like it. You're our passengers. If you don't trust us, you're not going to buy tickets. Simple. If you don't buy tickets, I cannot buy fuel, I cannot fly. This one I already touched, cybersecurity and cyber safety. In a business, it's a major business risk. Okay, you lose your business, too bad. Next one, in aviation, we have to call it safety. And everybody is responsible for safety in aviation. Everybody. The guy that fuels my airplane, the guy that pumps up the tires, my mechanic, my technician, even the administration in our airline office, everybody is responsible for aviation from the beginning when they board, when we onboard them in our company. One thing we do to prevent higher risks is create a culture, a safety culture, where we accept that people make mistakes so that we can learn from them. That is something we all should actually try and look at and implement in our own organization, because this creates a culture that will promote safety in a safe environment. Explaining this is a presentation on its own. I can't elaborate much more, but the culture in a company is important for the level of safety and the reduction of risk. Talking of which, this is a Boeing 787, and I'd shortly like to show you the threat surface of an airliner. So if we treat a jet like this as a piece of OT, then OT has a threat surface. All these systems are antennas that receive data, which means you can jam it, you can spoof it, jamming is blocking, like a DDoS attack, or you can feed it with wrong information, or whatever you want to do with it. But all these things are antennas sending something down or up to satellites. So if you can get into the weather radar or into the radar altimeter, whatever system, technically it's an access point. I can't tell you where it leads to, so there's no horizontal movement in my airplane because of the data bus that we have and the blocking that's being designed from the beginning, but that's done by the factory, by the OEM. So Boeing does this for us and Airbus does it for us. They're not going to tell me exactly how they did it, but we have to trust them. This, gentlemen, is the server room of a Boeing 787. This is what it looks like. We have about 2,000 computers on board. The bigger ones are in this server room, and it is in the lower part behind the nose wheel. And you cannot reach it. That's a security measure or control as well. You can't reach it from the airplane, and you can only reach it on the ground, and airplanes on the ground are on an airport and there's extra security. So that's also a control we have, that you cannot tinker with our computers when we talk cyber safety. Now, talking about safety, we talked about risks, we talked about threats, we talked about vulnerabilities, but we cannot reduce the risk to zero. We have to fly. The thing was designed to fly. But the thing I want to tell you today is, whatever happens, the aviation community is always working in making it even safer. Looking at the statistics of the last 50 years, I think we proved that. We continue to make it safer. Right now we have some extra challenges in hybrid warfare and conflict areas, but still, we're going to fly as safe as possible. Summarizing, peacetime, risk, very low, getting lower every year. We're doing a great job. However, wartime, a lot of misidentifications and probably also purposely shooting down of airliners is not great. It's not happening much, but it is a risk. The more conflict zones we have, the higher that risk. Simple enough. However, and this is my takeaway for you people today, we are now, the whole world, also Thailand, is in between these. It's not peace anymore. We all know that our Chinese friends are hacking Thailand on a daily basis. Friends don't do that. But it's not a kinetic war. They're not shooting missiles at us. So we're in between here, hybrid warfare. And this is important. This is an important mindset. It's not peace anymore. It's not war, but it's certainly not peace anymore. And in aviation, we are very much aware of that. And I'd like you to be that too. Please remember, there are increased risks in this in-between war, hybrid war stage, if I can say it like that. We are vulnerable as an airline, and the consequences are high because there's people on board. Any questions so far? So what happened to my flight the other day with the GPS jamming? It was really crazy. The airplane thought I was somewhere over Switzerland in the mountains at a lower altitude. So it thought, hey, there's a mountain in front of you, better pull up. So the standard procedure that we teach, and which is actually an emergency procedure, full throttle, nose up, and fly out of the terrain. But at this altitude, that was the ceiling of my airplane. I couldn't get any higher. There was not much thrust left, because the higher you get, the less dense the air is, and the least power the engines give. So we just ignored it, and it went away by itself. It didn't reset though, and we stopped using the GPSs for the rest of the remainder of the flight, and we made a conventional approach to our destination. But this can go wrong if you're not prepared, depending on the airport you're going to. So it all went fine. We trained for this as well, but it's a new risk introduced into flying during hybrid warfare. Conflict zones, this was the area I was flying in. Next one. And this was the route I was doing from Larnaca, which is Cyprus. Look at all the red areas. This was the route I was flying, hugging Ukraine, then north to Vilnius, Belarus, also Russia, not nice guys. This here, Kaliningrad, the red dot, also full of Russians. So there's a lot of spoofing going on. It all went well, and we trained for this. Still. This is the end of my presentation, gentlemen. Any questions? Sir.
My question is, are there examples of a plane being hacked? You know, it's possible, and what has happened? Do you have some examples?
I'm sure you understand that that is classified. However, I think 20 years ago, people were playing with it, hacking Wi-Fi in an airplane, the passenger Wi-Fi system, and then they tried to move horizontally, and at some point, they got somewhere. But they never got to the flight computers, the flight data computers, or the flight control computers. Since then, things are changing. There's pen testing being done. The results are classified. I can't share it. So, honestly, I don't know. I don't read it. I can't find it on the dark web either. So far, so good. I think most important thing to understand is that the Wi-Fi in an airplane is not connected to anything that is important to me as the captain. So go ahead and hack. And the other thing is, hacking an airplane in flight at 12 kilometers of altitude, what are you going to use? How are you going to do that? That's really difficult. The best thing you can do is hack one of my communication systems. I have a fax, a telex on board. Okay, you can read the weather of my destination airport. Okay, great. I don't call that hacking. But really taking over control, not. Haven't seen it. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Anyone else?
What about the chance of compromising air traffic control? Compromising air traffic control, so basically trying to spoof them into giving false information or false commands or whatever instructions to the airplane?
Same answer. Haven't seen it yet. And looking at the infrastructure of the airplane and the redundancy in computers we have, it's not going to happen. So hacking an airplane is not that the picture that Hollywood tries to make us, that a guy with a beard and a remote control is flying my airplane into the mountain. That's not how it's going to be. However, we know now they can harass us easily, they can confuse us easily. Confused pilots make mistakes. And that's a higher risk actually at the moment. But really taking over control, that's something for a Hollywood movie. That's not going to happen. Anybody else? I was waiting for that.
I have interested about the GPS jamming. What is going on when your flight some the lost and then stop the GPS and you lost somewhere and to the where are you going?
So my airplane has two GPS systems, independent, but there also is a triple IRS system, which is based on gyros. And there's also a radio navigation system that takes beacons, radio beacons, from all over the area we're flying over. And then it takes a distance and a bearing, which also gives us a location. So these three systems, IRS, radio navigation, and GPS together into an algorithm will give the most probable location of my airplane. Now, if the GPS is out of the equation, the whole accuracy gets a little bit less, but still good enough to fly. The problem rises when the GPS are being spoofed, giving a coordinate which is 1,000 kilometers away. Because then my navigation algorithm is trying to give me an average. So the circle of probability of my location is getting very large. That's when the real problems start. So the thing is, switch them off as soon as possible. Anybody else? Last one, because we need to take the stage.
I would like to just add this question which he had. So once you are in the flight, so there are a lot of chances to you can hack into the things. So a couple of examples which I recently also traveled, right? Have you heard of the device, simple device, which is Flipper, which is Flipper Zero? Anybody heard about that? So Flipper Zero is the one of the device which allows you to, interfere between the signals. You can do a jamming, you can do a lot of things, communication, gaps, air gap networks. And that will allow you, if you are inside the flight, and it is still allowed in the flight, not all the airports is, catching that device. So if you are inside flight, you can do a lot of jamming and interfere with the signals, and you can do a lot many things.
Mobile jammers, very interesting. I'd like to have a chat with you later. I need one. The thing is, you can only jam something that radiates. In my airplane, I have, I think, 55 kilometers of cable. You cannot jam a cabled connection. So that's where I can say with high security, you go ahead and play with it. Still, I'd like to know what it is later on. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much for an insightful session. Thank you very much once again, Captain Serge. Okay, for more detail, please feel free to catch up with him later in person. I believe that he can give you a lot of fun histories and many of insightful informations for all of you. So stay tuned. But before we are going to move on to the next topic, on the screen will appear once again the conference survey. We'd like to request some of a few minutes from yours, and then you can evaluate our this year event สำหรับนะคะการทำเซอร์เวย์อยากจะขออนุญาตให้ทุกท่านนะคะได้มีการสแกน QR code เพื่อที่จะได้กรอกแบบสอบถามนะคะสำหรับทีมงานในการพัฒนาการจัดงานครั้งต่อๆไปค่ะเมื่อสักครู่นี้สนุกมากๆเลยนะคะเราก็ได้ความรู้นะไปแบบอินไซต์สุดๆเลยทีเดียวค่ะจากทางด้านของกัปตันเซิร์ชนะคะก็ได้มาพูดถึงเรื่องของการรักษาความปลอดภัยน่านฟ้านะคะแล้วก็การประเมินความเสี่ยงทางไซเบอร์นะคะซึ่งก็ต้องบอกว่าจริงๆแล้วเนี่ยสำหรับเหตุการณ์หรือว่าการถูกโจมตีการแทรกแซงในรูปแบบต่างๆนะคะของ commercial airline หรือว่าการบินนะพลเรือนก็ต้องเผชิญความเสี่ยงนะคะมากมายเลยทีเดียวนะคะกัปตันก็ได้มีการพูดถึงนะคะหลากหลายเหตุการณ์ให้เราได้ฟังกันก่อนสงครามนะคะแต่ว่าพอในปัจจุบันหลังจากช่วงของสงครามเองเนี่ยความเสี่ยงนั้นก็อาจจะมีความลดลงแต่ว่ายังไงเราก็ต้องมีการเฝ้าระวังนะคะแล้วก็ต้องมีการดีเทคติดตามนะถึงความเสี่ยงนะคะที่จะเกิดขึ้นทางด้านไซเบอร์แล้วก็อุตสาหกรรมการบินพลเรือนในปัจจุบันอีกด้วยเพราะฉะนั้นนะก็ถือว่าเป็นหนึ่งความสำคัญในการที่จะประเมินความเสี่ยงแล้วก็การเตรียมรับมือความพร้อมนะคะได้อย่างมีประสิทธิภาพมากที่สุดนั่นเองนะคะใครสนใจอยากจะพูดคุยสอบถามเพิ่มเติมนะคะกัปตันยังอยู่ตรงนี้อยู่ก็มาพูดคุยกับ กับกัปตันเซิร์ชได้เลยค่ะแต่เดี๋ยวช่วงนี้นะคะสำหรับเดชั่นถัดไปเราจะได้มาฟังในหัวข้อที่น่าสนใจกันต่อเพราะฉะนั้นแล้วนะคะเราอยู่กันตลอดทั้งช่วงบ่ายของวันนี้นะกับที่บริเวณ Tech Stage นะคะยังมีหัวข้อที่น่าสนใจอีกมากมายเลยทีเดียว